Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is an exciting moment for myself and I think for Eva as well, because we're the two execs on My Father's Shadow. So my name is Ama Ampadu. I'm wearing a green dress. I'm a black woman with short hair. Funmbi.
My name is Funmbi Ogunbanwo. I'm wearing a bright yellow dress, and I am light-skinned, and my hair is kind of short.
My name's Rachel Dargavel. I'm a producer at Element Pictures, produced the film My Father's Shadow. I'm a petite white woman with short hair and very happy and smiling. From Matlock.
My name is Akinola Davies Jnr. I'm a filmmaker, director of My Father's Shadow. I'm a black man with glasses on and blonde hair.
Hi, my name is Wale Davies. I'm the writer, My Father's Shadow, and I'm a black man, tall, wearing what feels like blue, but it might be indigo. Yeah.
And my name is Eva Yates. I'm the director of BBC Film, and I'm a white woman with red hair and a blue dress.
Thank you. We've got a lot to get through, so we're going to do our best to whiz through a lot of questions to give you an interesting perspective on this amazing film. It hasn't been screened yet, so we can't give you much detail about the story, but we'll give you a synopsis. So I'm going to start with Akinola. Akinola, who I described as an image-making, multi-hyphenated artist. You began and continue working in commercials and fashion film. You also create art film. How and when did the idea of making narrative feature come about?
Thank you for the question. I would probably say according to Eva, I've always been making narratives, even though I didn't think of them as such. A lot of the music videos I was making were, she told me they were shorts, which I didn't realize at the time. I just thought they were music videos, weird music videos. But we met in 2017. I'm lucky enough to have a really wonderful creative community, and one of the people in that community was Mika Levi, and I was trying to make an art film for her and her collective of musicians. And we were trying to find money, so she just kept on sending me people's emails, and one of them was Rose Garnett. And then I got an email back from the BBC, and then went and met Eva and took my little laptop and loads of ideas, and she just was very generous and warm and said she'd like to make a feature. And I was like, who's this crazy lady? But yeah, and I think it sort of started there. We made the short film Lizard, which won Sundance in 2021, and then evolved to this position.
So I'm going to move on to Wale, who is also multi-hyphenated. So you're a musician. You have a group called Show Them Camp. Yeah. You are also the manager of Thames. And
blowing up your spot.
I had to do this. And an extraordinary writer. So My Father's Shadow stems from a short story you wrote. What inspired the story, and how did you and Akinola collaborate to expand it into a feature? And it'd be good to know what your creative process are as a duo.
Yeah, so I think the story is mostly inspired by fatherhood, really, and like, you know, for both of us, we lost our father pretty early, so it's sort of like the search for fatherhood. And I think that as we grew, we started like our mom would share loads of stories about our father, and I think the full picture we have of him is based on stories our mom would tell or his friends would tell. And so it was just the idea of trying to like discover who this person is, especially in a situation where I just became a father close to the time as I was writing the story, and that balance of working to feed your family and in this world, like you work super hard, you're traveling, you're doing different things, but also back home where the stark realities of life mean if you don't work, you may not survive, you know, and then balancing that with presence and being there for your family physically, you know, and exploring that and just trying to have a conversation around that, because I don't think that's spoken about enough, you know, especially as the world is evolving. So I think that's the personal story with my father, and then I guess fathers in general was the inspiration for me in putting it together.
And can you give us a little synopsis, just so that people can just get a little insight into what they're going to see tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it's really about two young boys. One of them called Akin, funny enough, who who get to spend a day with their father and really in that day discover a lot more about his world, his life, his nuances, and just, you know, they have pieces of who he is, but I think in this day it really gives them a fuller picture, a fuller understanding of who their father actually is.
And so, yeah, and then Akin, in terms of writing, how does it work? You know, the two brothers, who writes first, who adds, that kind of...
I think the process differs. Like, I came up with this story for Lizard, and the only other person I'd known who'd written a screenplay was Wale, so that was like the test run. But even before that, we've been collaborating with each other for years. We were making short films in different parts of Nigeria as an opportunity to learn more about our country and get to see it actually, because it's something that, you know, it's not really sort of afforded to our generation. You're not really encouraged to travel around too much. But the process of writing, we tend to sort of go away together for 10 days, try and be as isolated as possible. While he does most of the writing, and then I sort of like help Stu in regards to ideas and visual input and edits, and then we sort of, just go back and forth. We watch a lot of stuff, we have a lot of debate. We like being in like a nature sort of driven environment, but yeah, for the most part, I think that's our process, right?
Yeah, and he stops me from going on Instagram like most of the day. So.
Okay, so the story is set in 1993, which is a pivotal year in Nigeria's post-colonial history. Is also a significant period in the history of democracy in the country. Can you tell us a bit about the significance of that year and why you chose to set the film during that period?
Yeah, so I think one of the other things we wanted to explore was like nationhood as well, because in some sort of way, we've always been led to believe in Nigeria that our nation is meant to take care of us. I guess every country, right? But here, like the promise of this better Nigeria, something they've told us is Vision 2000, Vision 2020, Vision 2010. They keep extending the vision, right? And so we really wanted to explore, and I think a significant moment was in 1993. We had elections then, and we were going to transition from military rule, which we'd had for quite a long time, into civilian rule. So everybody was super excited. They believed the country was about to change, was about to take off. And I think it's one of those things where we've never really had a consensus candidate before, where everybody super supported this one person, and he won the election. And after the election, they suddenly just stopped counting when it was clear he was winning by a landslide. And I feel in that moment where they said, well, no, we're actually not holding an election anymore, we're canceling it, I think it broke something in the trust of people, like this unspoken contract between your nation and you, that, you know, they're going to, at this point, it felt like all bets were off, if I'm being honest. And I just remember the elation beforehand and the deflation afterwards. Everybody was angry, sad, frustrated. And I'd never really seen, looking at my mom, especially in that moment, I'd never really seen her like that as well, because she really believed things were going to change. And she was one of those people, just watch, like it's going to be better, everything is going to be amazing. And yeah, unfortunately, that never came, and we're still kind of really waiting for that spark to happen. Yeah,
So the individual's name's MKO Abiola, and I will have to say that his daughter has honored us to be in this room. So Yomi Abiola is sitting right there. So Eva, My Father's Shadow was developed by the BBC. BBC and BFI co-financed its production. Fremantle also contributed to the finance plan. Can you talk us through a little bit about the BBC's role as commissioner? How did you first become aware of Akinola's work? How did the process of building Lizard and My Father's Shadow begin? And why do you think it was important to back Akinola in the way that you did?
It's a lot of questions, right?
So you told the story of how we met. I'd already seen your work when you wrote that email, so you'd done quite a few things around the same time, which all had this, did have quite a narrative feel, but weren't telling linear stories necessarily. So we met, you'd done that amazing Kenzo piece, and you'd also done the Charcoal Baby video around that time. So those are the two things I think I'd seen when we first met. And you came with a folder of lots of different ideas, and there were features in there, there were short ideas, we started talking about another short, and then I said, you can't do anything without a producer. And really at the same time, or within the same weeks, you wrote me an email saying you'd just met Rachel and you really wanted to work with Rachel. And I knew of Rachel. She had sent us a project previously, which we hadn't ended up backing, but I'd said to her, please talk to us if you've got other things, don't be discouraged. And so she had then written us an email saying, could we all talk together about what it looks like? And then you sent a voice note telling the story of Lizard once you'd sort of landed on that as what you wanted. And then we said, okay, this feels like it is the one that we should do. And then we went through that process. We worked with you on the script. We financed that short. Did really well. Got into Sundance. You won the prize in Sundance. It was in COVID year, so it was kind of frustrating that you didn't get that opportunity to be out in the world. And then you came with the idea of My Father's Shadow, and we met Wale. And I guess it was a process of us all going back and forwards and figuring out how do you hold on to what you care about? How do you, there's a personal nature in the story which felt like we had to be really delicate about, but we also wanted to find the way to make the story connect as well as possible, whilst also not becoming over explicit or defined. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things watching the film. So, and then it became a process of how do we put this together and who do we go to and who would be good partners, and Funmbi became part of that, and all the amazing people who then worked with you on the shoot. So, and then we went through the edit with Ama as our exec at BFI, and Fremantle came on with money, and it just came together everywhere. I think the project went, people saw what you were trying to do, and that it had it's a very, very moving story, and I think people really wanted to see it. So it came together with, was not easy, but actually in terms of finding enthusiasm and to support you, that was very straightforward. I think there was a team of people who really trusted to make something quite special.
Brilliant. So that leads us on to Rachel. So what did draw you to Akinola as a filmmaker? Because in addition to working for Element Pictures, you own your own production company, Crybaby, and that's where the project originated. So you developed it at Crybaby, and then when you moved to Element, the project migrated to Element, and My Father's Shadow is still in association with Crybaby. Yeah. How does My Father's Shadow reflect the kind of voices and stories you aim to champion as a producer? So.
I met Akinola about 5 or 6 years ago, and I moved to London, and I was working in music videos, and I was also always really intrigued as to how there is a potential for people who could make great image, might be able to harness that power into narrative. And it sounds really simple, and you meet a lot of people that can make things look pretty, but that doesn't always mean that they can tell a narrative story. And I was sort of doing deep diving into that world and trying to understand what voices and who was doing what. And I stumbled across Akinola's work, and I sort of became quite fascinated about it because it was ultimately really simple. I was drawn to the simplicity of it, which essentially I think created a blank canvas for space and for narrative story. And I just loved it. I loved the way he pointed the camera at people and asked you to really look at what you were seeing. He wasn't trying to make you feel a certain way or tell you a certain thing. He was leaving space for the viewer, for the audience, to make their own opinions and decisions about what was being shown or what was being said. And I found that I thought that had got space and be able to kind of harness narrative. So I dropped him a message on Instagram, and I was like, hey, I think, your music videos and your docs, and like you said, they're not really music videos, but what you're making is really interesting, and have you thought about making a narrative film? And Akin got back to me and said, I have, and let's meet. And we met in a coffee shop, and it sort of happened simultaneously, I think, to you meeting with Eva. And we sort of, two strangers in a coffee shop, got together, and I said, I like your thing. And obviously, Akinola must have liked me at the time. And we said, let's do a film together. And I emailed Eva, and then we moved from there. So from a coffee shop to Cannes is the story. And then in terms of my own slate, my own work, I'm looking for really distinctive voices who have got a hold on empathy, who have got a hold on character, that have something to say with heart, that can handle people and things tenderly, but that also aren't too serious or bleak, and that have an undertone of humour to them. And I think that I ultimately want to entertain people, and I want to use storytelling as a way to bring people together. So in terms of My Father's Shadow or other films that I want to make, I love the idea of bringing different people from different places together to tell a universal story so that we can help the world feel all at once bigger narratively, but also smaller in terms of interpersonally. And that's what really drives me with, you know, people and projects and things that I want to put my energy into. So I try to concentrate that and lean into kind of, I think, authenticity and, you know, entertainment. I mean, I grew up on films from, you know, John Waters, I loved Spielberg, I loved Tarantino, I loved, you know, all the classics. I loved David Lynch, you know, I watched a lot of films when I was at university and went on a bit of a kind of film journey, bought a digital camera, shot everything and everyone, including myself, hours of footage, and just kind of started trying to understand what stories I wanted to make. And then probably in about 2004, I watched a film by filmmaker called Shane Meadows called Dead Man's Shoes, and it was shot in my hometown in Matlock, and it kind of changed my view. It really helped me to understand what stories I wanted to take, because all of a sudden I was seeing like my people from my tiny little village on screen murdering each other, and I was sort of like, that's great.
Let's do this.
Yeah. And so then I was like, oh, like, you know, stories like can transcend. It doesn't matter where you're from or what you do. And it started to make me really interested in the world of storytelling and how you can open that up. And, you know, in Matlock, I didn't really even know anything about Nigeria. But when I saw Akin's project and we talked about it, I was so excited, because I was like, not only will that help me to grow and become a better person, to understand different worlds and different cultures, but also I can help people have their Shane Meadows moment, which I had when I was starting out in my film career. So I'm also incredibly driven by that.
Brilliant. God, lots of exciting projects to come. So I'm going to move on to Akinola. My Father's Shadow is visually spectacular. Congratulations, Akin.
Thank you.
Chose to work with Jermaine Edwards. What drew you to Jermaine, and how did you work together to develop the visual language? You also decided to shoot on film in Nigeria. Why was that essential?
What drew me to Jermaine? He's just a lovely, lovely human being. Rachel
I gave Jermaine his first job ever as a runner on my short film. I've got to say that.
Rachel's been really like a real blessing. She introduced me to Shabir Krishna for Lizard, and I'd been introduced to Jermaine, I think a similar time, right? Yeah. And he was also considered for Lizard as well. And I just really liked him. He kind of felt a bit like an outsider, and I think sometimes I felt, or still sometimes feel like an outsider, and we really get on. And I think culturally, like, he's sort of Caribbean but doesn't live in London, and I think that offers a different perspective than someone like who lives in London. Equally, I think Jermaine is extremely talented, but he'd always been like invited to the ball but never asked to dance. He'd always been shooting for other directors, camera operating, and we'd worked on a documentary project we've been shooting across the UK for like the last 2-3 years, and we just spent a lot of time together, and I just really loved spending time with him and felt that, you know, it would just be an honor for him to sort of lens My Father's Shadow as his first feature film. He's gone and done 2 now, but he's just really wonderful. I mean, I think we share a similar ethos. So coming to your question about why do we shoot on film, I think there's a way we want black people to be portrayed on screen. There's a way we want to capture them. There's a way we want to humanize them in the way we photograph them. And I would also say that shooting on 16, I just, you know, I love cinema, and I love Lagos, and I think Lagos deserves its moment on celluloid, because maybe for a lot of The digital age kind of came in and has really swept up, and it's fantastic. But I just think Lagos is such a cinematic city. You can point a camera anywhere, and it's just, there's so much depth in that image. And I think 16 was really good. I shot 35 in Lagos as well, and it kind of blew my mind. So it was just really good to do that. And also the process of shooting on film, I think is really, for me as a first-time filmmaker, is really generous, because it means we can slow things down. We're not obsessing over like the minutiae of details. We're looking at the fuller picture. Us as a crew, we get to spend more time with each other. We get to enjoy each other. We get to sort of question each other and encourage each other. With the actors, we get to rehearse more. The two boys, Marvelous and Godwin, is their first film, so not rushing them and trying to sort of understand what it's like even for me to direct two children who are like 11 and 9 years old without feeling them, making them feel like they're working, because I had to promise them that we were going to have fun the whole time, you know. So, and they definitely like held me accountable to that. And there was a middle question. Did I miss that?
No.
Oh,
Good.
okay.
But
and the period, thank you. And as a good producer, and that's also, it was a period film.
Yeah.
So I think it really sort of helped us, you know, because Lagos is one of those cities that really embraces technology. It's very like future forward, but we were trying to capture a certain essence of it, and film also just really helped in that, basically.
So it was an entire village. I can say that it was an entire village behind, my father's
Half
shadow.
of the village is here.
Half of the village is here.
Yes.
So we spoke about Jermaine. Do you want to talk a little bit about the other HODs and crew?
Oh, yeah, with pleasure.
Signpost some of them.
Yeah, so BAFTA award-winning PC Williams worked on the film. We had Shaheen Baig and Lala on casting, and who else do we have?
Lucy, we have Ayo.
There you go.
Anti-design.
Anti-design.
Duval, Timothy did the score.
Ade.
Omar Guzman
Ade.
from Mexico. Ade, our first AD. EA, who's our location scouts. Moya DeYoung over there.
Nick Hayes.
Nick Hayes, line producer, came with me from the commercial world. I had to fight for him. Just amazing crew. Like, you know.
Yeah, well done, all of you. Well done. And then, well done. And then we move on to casting. So you've got how can I describe him? This magnificent Shope Darisu, who you managed to get on board this project, and also the two wonderful boys. How did that go about? Wale, are you involved in this process at all? Do you want to?
No, it was mostly him, to be honest. But I think one of the main things that, you know, with regards to the Folari, the character Shokwe plays in the film, was just that my main thing is that he really needs to have like eyes. Like for me, it's really in eyes, like really powerful, like eyes that speak of different things he embodies in the film. And so when Akin told me he had met with Shokwe, and he sent me pictures of him, I was like, and I'd seen the horror, his house, I think. Yeah, I'd seen that. And I didn't even know, like, it was the same guy. So I was like, but I've seen this guy somewhere. So I went to, like, Google, and I was like, oh, yeah, I love that film. I watched it in the pandemic. And Akin spoke to him. And I think one of the most, you know, I give Akin credit a lot for it, because for someone coming to Lagos and other parts of Nigeria, first-time director, shooting on film, the personality of the person you bring is also super important. And someone who's willing to be a trooper in a lot of I'm sure, situations that he's never seen and never experienced before. But he was really like, yeah, I'll try that. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'm down. You know, and so that's one thing I think was really special. Aside from his amazing acting, he was just really happy to be immersed in everything, and really wanted to, like, you know, he was, even with the boys, he's down to like practice with them. He's down to, so he came with no real ego.
Learning Yoruba.
Yeah, learning Yoruba as well.
Learning
like
the accent.
Exactly. Like he came with no real ego. He really came to like immerse himself in our world, and, you know, be forever grateful for that.
Yeah, we just knew we needed someone with a certain level of stature. Not like a name per se, but someone who like filled the screen. And I'd seen Shokwe one night in Miami at the Donmar like a few years before, and I just loved all the actors involved in that. And then I saw him in his house, never really made that connection. And then I saw him in Gangs of London, actually. I think I watched the first few episodes. And then by that time, we were already talking about who we could potentially cast. And I just remember sending Wale, I was like, I think this is the guy, you know? Like, he just has a... Yeah, Shokwe is just like a real blessing. He's such a talented instrument as an actor that actually you put him in any space and then you see like how technically gifted he is. And I think beyond that, he really like lifted up the two boys. He really fathered them throughout the process of the film. That's something I wasn't aware I was really asking of him, because I just thought he's just going to come and act and he'll step off and he'll step on. But actually, like, between scenes, I would just see him like giving them notes, like scolding them for like, for playing too much or acting, talking out of turn or whatever. He just really became their father in that process, and he really embraced it. And I didn't realize what an emotional and task I was sort of like putting onto him, but he just took it with grace. And even with other actors like Winnie, he was just really supportive and incredible, to be honest. We couldn't be grateful. Do you want to say something?
I want to say, because I think he's got this sort of strength and masculinity about him. And, Falar in The Father, when you watch the movie, he's not perfect. He's no perfect guy, right? But he's also beautifully imperfect. And, Shoppe has this sort of strength and masculinity about him that we saw, but also he's really empathetic and in touch with his kind of natural emotion, and so he's able to transcend that imperfect nature, so he's still a likable person, he's a likable protagonist. And I think that was really important for the film, that we had someone that was imperfect but likable. And it's that kind of, he is ultimately a hero, but he's not a perfect hero. He's like, and there's not that many actors that can kind of look in the way that he did and act with that sensitivity.
And just to add on what Wale said, also Shokwe is like, I think, first generation, and having someone who doesn't have a huge experience of Nigeria sort of coming and being able to live in that vulnerability of like, how you're going to relate to the other actors, how you're going to relate to the director, how you're going to relate when you're used to a different standard of working, he just really worked with everyone, and I think he learnt as much from like the local talent as people learnt from him. And then in addition, our two boys, our two legends, Godwin and Marvelous, we sort of set our net quite wide. We wanted to try sort of like talent schools. We wanted to try like secondary schools, churches, anywhere basically.
Community centers.
Yeah, community centers, 100%. And ironically, they weren't even in the first round of casting. They weren't even in the second round of casting. To be honest, they weren't even in the third round of casting. But we needed to fill. We were doing a child's workshop, and we needed to fill some parts. And they had two of the weirdest self-tapes I've ever seen. And I was like, let's get these kids. They're interesting. And then on the day, I didn't know they were brothers. Their names were not tagged properly, but they were very tactile with each other, and they were like really encouraging to themselves and other kids. And I was like, there's something going on here. And Shaheen like noticed it as well and kind of pointed everyone in their direction. And then the next day we tagged them properly and realized they were brothers, and their mother is a script writer, so they had a good ability to retain the lines, even if they didn't know what the lines meant. And then... yeah, I liked a couple of other kids, but I got vetoed very quickly by everyone else. But I think for the right reasons. I think I was a bit worried that it was a lot to ask two children to potentially carry a film who've never acted before. I was a bit sort of overwhelmed on their behalf. But I think we as a team like put together like a good infrastructure around them, like Rachel and Funmbi, particularly like Rachel as a mother, Wale as a father, Funmbi as someone who knows the territory of Nigeria and just how to be delicate with kids as well. I think, we all sort of parented them effectively in that moment.
It was such a gift they were brothers, because on top of the kind of overwhelming nature of a shoot for a kid, and like the multiple and many locations that we visited on the shoot, I was kind of worried about finding kids that could manage all that and pretend they were someone's brother. So like the fact they were brothers just meant that big part of the issue went away. So I think, I was very for them from the off.
Well, so the entire shoot, as you've established, was in Nigeria, in Lagos and Ibadan. to be precise. And so do you want to, you've talked a lot about preparation, but do you want to talk, are there any key moments in the prep that you want to highlight and any standout production moments?
Yeah, sure. Many. How long have you got?
So it's a standout.
There's a counselling course that we're running on in the side. No, not really. Well, aside from casting the boys, which was like monumental, that was like such a big moment, and also Shoppe, that made things feel very, very real. I would say attaching Mubi as our UK, US and Turkish distributor, and Match Factory as our sales agent for the rest of the world. That really, and bringing in the Fremantle piece, which was the last piece of money to come in, really were kind of massive, monumental moments for the production where we were like, okay, things are getting real. And, you know, Lucy, Funmbi and I actually really did start to then panic about the budget because we were like, this is the maximum amount of money we're going to get. We need to make the film and we need to make it in Nigeria on 60mm with children. Let's go. So that was a really big moment. I think personally for me on the shoot itself, probably one of the biggest moments was very stressful was the beach scene, which I know you guys haven't seen the film yet, but I found that particular moment, you know, it's the heart of the film, the scene, and when you watch the film, I hope it resonates and you understand, but it was really difficult to make that happen and actually make that come together. And it was quite stressful. And, you know, we were all sort of working very hard to try and make it happen. There was things going wrong all over the place and chaos reigned and all the rest of it. And on the actual day, I think it's fair to say, like, Akinola and Jermaine, they were in the sea. There was waves going over them. The boys couldn't swim.
It's called having a meltdown.
You know, it's called having a meltdown. And so on a personal level, like, I felt that I'm not new to the film industry. I've worked as an AD, I've worked as a production coordinator, I've been a production manager, I've line produced. It's been a really long road for me to get here today. And so on those particular days, I really felt like all that experience culminated for me in that moment, and I was able to really be producing the movie and really support Akinola and Jermaine to get in there and to get the scene and to make it happen. And when I watch that scene now, I'm like so proud of that. And I think for me, that's like a real sort of, you know, to all of the people out there that are like struggling and they can't get their break and they want to be a producer, but they're not. And, you know, you just have to keep trying, and eventually if you get the right people in the right project, it'll happen. And so for me, just on a really practical, basic level, I'm super proud of that from a production perspective. And, you know, that's where the collaboration with Funmbi really comes into it, in that, you know, you need partners and people to work with that can support you where you need it, you know. And obviously me, I'm from Matlock. I'm going to Lagos to make a movie. I need help.
So that brings us nicely to...
Can I add to that as well, just real quick? There's like a group of disenfranchised like young men in Nigeria. They sort of labeled area boys, and people sort of kind of disregard them and think they're kind of rough, which by circumstance they kind of end up in that situation. But I think what I was most proud of was like seeing them put to work. Like if you give people the dignity and the self-respect, and you pay them a fair wage, and you feed them, how organized and structured they can become. And I think that goes a long way towards Funmbi and Rachel and Fatherland and Element and all the infrastructure we put in place for the crew. I think other than making the film, I think for me that was really proud, because I think the narrative of a lot of people, unfortunately, is that they are, you know, that they can't really function in structure. But actually, I think if people feel fed and they feel respected, that they 100% can, basically.
Okay, so moving on to Funmbi. So you co-own the Nigerian production company Fatherland. Can you tell us a bit about the industry, what impact My Father's Shadow has had, and what your hopes for the future of the industry is, including collaboration with the UK? So we know about Nollywood. Expand on that.
It's a padded question. Okay, I think so. with Fatherland is me, Wale, Aki, and when Wale and I met a couple years ago, about 7 years ago, I would say now, we really just bonded on just wanting to tell well-rounded stories of our people, but do it in a way that feels universal and doing it in a way that resonates with everyone, and at the same time, treat people well. That's all. Like, we just care so much about the community and wanted to make sure that in the process of making anything, that people are well taken care of. And so we just bonded on that, and we started off just doing like service jobs and doing commercials here and there, working with Aki as well. And then we did Lizard, and then obviously COVID shut down. When you're running a business, everything shuts down. So there was nothing going on then. And then we started talking about My Father's Shadow. I read the script, and for me to see Lagos so alive in the story, to see the sights and the sounds of Lagos and truly have Lagos situated as a third character in this whole piece. As someone who's created in that space for most of my life, I went to school in England, studied law, came back to Nigeria. So I've had the experience of living in two places at the same time, like when I was a teenager and now that I'm an adult. But being in Lagos specifically, it does something to you. There's a charm and there's a beauty. There is chaos, a lot of chaos, but there is also a lot of brilliance that comes from that chaos. And I think that, you know, for me, it was really the setup of like My Father's Shadow and being like, you know, with Fatherland and with Element, and then coming together to like really just tell the story with Lucy and Rachel and myself just being on calls, like endlessly worrying about budget and things like that, you know, and having like, you know, our production managers like Ayo and Jumafo like there and just slaving away. I think it was such a joint collaborative effort. And the spirit of it, I think, is what you see on the screen. You know, I think truly it lives on the screen because, like, we really just wanted to help each other and, like, show up for each other and care for each other as well. So half the time, Rachel's like, "Are you okay?" And then half the time, I'm like, "Are you okay?" You know, and I think, you know, with that kind of partnership, like, it really does translate to the rest of the crew and the rest of the team, and like everyone just adopts that as like a standard. And with Nigeria, I think, you know, this is the first Nigerian film to get into Cannes, which is exciting. And I was saying earlier today on a panel earlier that I don't want this to be the only. You know, it's the first, but it shouldn't be the only. So our doors are open. I know that the Screen Nigeria is here with the Pavilion as well. So for me, it's how do we strengthen in a formal way, like the partnership between the UK and Nigeria. There's a rich diaspora that exists there. And how do both countries come together with the history that exists between both countries? How do they come together to really like understand the issues concerning like creators that are in the diaspora, like Aki, who is Nigerian but lives in London, you know, and other creators who are in Nigeria, you know, but have like British like heritage as well. Like, how do we make sure that these sort of unique experiences, because it is unique, it's not, it's especially unique, I think, with both countries. So how do we make sure that in a formal, systemized way, that those creators have the support that they need, you know?
Yeah, it's useful to say, actually, like, it is, at the moment, it was a choice that we made as a group of people to work in the way that we have. It's not a formal UK co-production. And I think that, to echo what Funmbi said, I think that's important. And, you know, like, we decided to work in that way and want to continue to collaborate in that way, but it would be great to see a more formal sort of thing put together to help and support that.
I don't have much time, but I'm going to cut in and just kind of give you some framework. Okay, so anyway, I think it is important that Thierry Frémaux, when he talked about the film, did announce it as the first Nigerian film to be selected for the Cannes official lineup. He talked about Nollywood. We've mentioned the British identity. We know that it's certified British. I think I also wanted to talk about hybridity and this notion of having these dual identities. Akin, Wale, what do you want to say about the dual Nigerian-British identity of yourselves and of your work?
Yeah, I think it gives a different perspective. I think growing up in Nigeria mostly, and then going to live in the UK, live in Europe for a period of time, and then coming back, right? I think one of the things I realized, first from a film perspective, was that, you know, a lot of the films I'd seen of Africa portraying African characters didn't really capture the nuance of the characters that we see on a daily basis, you know. And for me, it was important that, like, you know, trying to create something that actually shows the Nigeria that I see on a daily basis. And I think that, you know, for us, like, watching films in England and seeing what, you know, it opened a whole new world, because growing up in Nigeria, we only saw American, like, big budget Hollywood films. And then in England, it was when I got introduced to a world of filmmaking that was very delicate and tender, and sometimes could be incredibly nuanced. And that was mostly a university, you know, when we should have been in class. We would be watching loads of films, French films, British films, and I think that for me, it showed a whole new scope to filmmaking. And coming back to Nigeria, it was just that actually I think a lot of this delicacy and nuance and actually lends better to our form of storytelling than huge explosions, or, you know, like, I think that there's a lot of human stories you see on a daily basis, and I think just taking those two perspectives that I've been fortunate, and that's another thing as well. We also have to stand there and say we're fortunate to be able to have a life that affords us to have visited multiple places and seen multiple things. And I think using that, sharpening that lens to come back home and tell really important stories about people that we see, I think is super important. I think it's a responsibility as well, to be honest.
Yeah. And if I could just add to that as well, I think, you know, with Folari's character, what you see represented in the masculinity that Rachel was speaking about, and also, like, the tenderness, is this, like, these are characters that exist in our lives, like, living in Nigeria. Like, so Folari represents, like, my dad, you know, and many other, like, male figures that are in our lives every day. So to Wale's point about, like, the nuance and, like, the pace of storytelling, like, I'm very blessed and very fortunate that we have, like, the notoriety of, like, being the first Nigerian film, but there are other filmmakers from Nigeria who've been trying to tell stories that are well-rounded and that are complex and that are nuanced, you know, and doing it in a way that feels authentic to the culture and the people. Yeah.
I mean, but to be fair, let's say we talk about Hollywood, Bollywood, Nollywood. So of the significant film industries, Nollywood is one of them. Hence the significance of this selection for the Cannes Film Festival, because it was actually quite rare for them to get some kind of insight into what this industry is. I would also like to, we have to finish before the questions, but certainly this notion of responsibility does come up, and as Black creatives, there is a responsibility that comes with making work. Has that shaped this film? How will it continue to shape the other films that you will make?
Wow.
Can you take that one and then we'll wrap up?
Well, I mean, I just think to make films is a complete blessing. To be in this industry is like, it's just sort of, you know, you're doing sort of like, you make believe, you know. It's as a kid, it's like really fascinating, and I think what makes any given story like what it is how specific it is, you know. And I think if you have people who are invested in that community, they can help you be even more specific. And I think, you know, like picking a Jermaine or picking a PC, like for me, it's just trying to get at the heart of something, basically. And I think ultimately what we try and do in our writing, we always say is we're just trying to get to the heart of what we're making. And I think, I just think there's incredible creatives who might not be afforded the opportunities for one reason or another. And I think as a director, I understand that my voice has a certain level of power, and it's important to also, you know, speaking about the dualities of being British Nigerian, it's like we really just want to build a bridge so that, you know, work and community goes both ways, and just, broaden our tent and be a sort of bigger family for sure.
And if there's anyone from any kind of Nigerian government official, what is needed is finance. Because certainly,
I was just about...
there's a necessity to have financial support for the filmmakers who are there. Certainly this film is British financed. I think the next example of My Father's Shadow, what would be nice is to have some finance coming from Nigeria as well. So I'll give the last word to Akin, and then I guess people have questions to ask.
Oh, I was just going to add and say, like, also Nigeria, but also I think it's important to acknowledge that there are other African films in uncertain regard, and it's really about us trying to build community amongst ourselves, share resources amongst ourselves, and also celebrate the fact that there's a film from Egypt, there's a film, from other parts as well, and hopefully we can just sort of bask in the moment together.
And can I just add as well, and I know that obviously the film is Nigerian story, but it's also about making films from any country where films and stories can travel. That it shouldn't be exclusively for that one audience, And I think with My Father's Shadow, we've worked very, very hard to collectively, hopefully, make a story that transcends, across many people. We all have or had or hopefully most people had a father, and not everybody, I understand that, but, a lot of us do. But we all suffer from grief. We all suffer from loss. We all suffer from life and the burdens of day-to-day things. And they're the things at the heart of everything that does transcend. And I think we all, as a collective group of people, we had that in our front of our mind as well, and hope that we have every success internationally for the film,
Absolutely. I mean, the point is more that for these specific stories to become universal, there's a need for a certain level of quality, and that level of quality requires finance. And so consequently, on the Nigerian side, if there could be support for the Nigerian industry, it would help.
Yes, it would.
Who has
a lot
questions for this brilliant team?
I'm William. I'm really looking forward to seeing your film on Monday, which might be the second screening. I was really interested to know a little bit more about the kind of writing process from Wale and Akinola. It sounds amazing you went away for a few weeks and worked on that first draft. What was the redrafting process like with your production partners? Like, did you get to draft 20, or was it actually a few drafts in, this is where we want to be?
Yeah, so I think that I've written many things before, but I think with Lizard and especially My Father's Shadow, stepping into the feature world was a huge step. And I think for me, the support I had from Eva, from Rachel, in terms of the notes I got, I remember one of the first meetings, I was, man, if I get here and these notes are crap, I'm going to push back. And I sat there and every single note, and I say this not because they sat next to me, but every single note they shared really helped me sharpen the story, sharpen the perspective of the story, figure out whose story we're telling. And, and each time I'll think I've cracked it, and then I get more notes and I'm, oh man. But, but I think when I ended up watching, even after so the edits and a lot of things have been cut away and it's a lot more lean than what was shot, I started to see oh wow, it was great that we tied up this end, or it was great that this was the perspective, and it really became clearer to me what feedback and collaboration in that realm looks like. I'm used to writing by myself, but then with Akinola, I think the main thing was, one, the first thing I ever sent him, he believed in it and he said we should keep writing together. And so when we go away, it's really us workshopping, and we're dialoguing and we're going back and forth, and we chop and change, and we think of and we do some research together. We get on calls, speak to people in the world we're trying to situate the film in, and then we go back and then we share with Eva, and Eva has some notes, and then Rachel helps us translate some of those notes and has some notes as well. And for me, I think, I'm very grateful for that part of the process. I think it's easy to live in a bubble and try and write in a bubble and end up you love what you write, hopefully, and just having people that are able to, you can tell it's not their first rodeo, and they know how to guide you in the right direction. I'm really grateful for that.
And I'll just say, Wale is a fantastic writer, and I think ultimately you will see how fantastic his writing is on the screen. And to your point, we didn't. The first thing was like, we've never probably done this before, so let's just write something, firstly, that we're going to enjoy reading. I think that was kind of our sort of anchor point. We didn't even know what a beat sheet was. We were just like, let's just write a first draft. We'll figure it out as we go. And then I think throughout that process, maybe it was like 3-4 drafts or something, but throughout that process, every development meeting just like added another layer, just helped us see like just little tweaks and stuff, because Eva, Ama, Rachel, just a lot more experienced than us, and ultimately we just really want to be submissive to the craft. And I think having people who are just like brilliant at what they do and cut through what you're trying to say in a very delicate way most of the time, but yeah, it's just really helpful and a real privilege.
Another gentleman behind.
Hi, my name is Olami Waju Damola. I'm from London, a bit nervous. I'm British Nigerian, and this just being here is really emotional for me because growing up in London, being Nigerian, not really green grinding my roots, to come here and see us, and this girl's amazing. I guess, what advice would you have for young British Nigerians who are now trying to, I guess, tell these stories in this way, being a platform, which is where you guys are? You said before you want to bridge more people from the diaspora and more people in Nigeria who are filmmakers. What advice would you have these young people who are like, we see you on stage, how do we, that's kind of, yeah.
Can I go first?
Please.
Okay. I mean, I would say the first thing is come home frequently, as much as you can. Come for Christmas, come for Dirty December, because that's a thing. Come during, the film festivals, come, during ArtX, come during Fashion Week, just come. Because I think what you find when you are home is that there's community. And where there's community, there's a sense of belonging. And where there's a sense of belonging, there's a sense of safety. And when there's safety, you can create, and you can create without barriers. So, and I would say that it really would ground the stories and the feeling that you have as well. And then as you sort of go back to London, like, bug Akin, get his details or something, And honestly, and like, just, I know that the BFI does, diversity like sessions as well. So I would say definitely getting into that would be a really helpful thing. Also disturb Amber, and I think that's one advice that I would say. And start with the lowest thing that is available. Like Rachel started with music videos. I started with documentaries. Like my background was shooting like, campaigns for Google and like stories. So I would say any form of like real experience that you can get like in the doing of something is really helpful. And there's lots of production. Also disturb Rachel because
Also just really be clear about what the story you want to tell is and why. Like, because otherwise you're on a really windy road. You just really need to know why you're telling the story and what it is. And if you know that, you can tell that story in England, you can tell it in Nigeria, you can tell it in Cairo, but that's the thing, you need to know what that idea is and you need to nurture it and grow it. And it takes a long time to just keep trying.
Just to add to that, I would say my advice is just like tell stories like I feel that like, a lot of times we're looking for a big script idea but I think even in your experience as a Nigerian, been in London, lived in London, there are characters there are people there's situations you've been through, there's questions about identity that you've grappled with and just having to assimilate and fit into different spaces, right? So like what does that trigger? What emotions does that trigger? And I would really say tell stories, and I think that one of the things, whether in Nigeria or in the UK, I think there's such a rich tapestry of experiences that we experience that I haven't yet seen on the screen. Like in the UK, like I'm sorry to sound disrespectful, but I think, there's a lot of like gang stuff and, and that's like, like in the life that I've lived and the people I've encountered, there's so much more nuance to them than that.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's just find the stories that you really know that really resonate with you, your family, your home, your friends, your community, and I'll say tap into that. Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Eva?
I think there's actually a really, I mean, you say that part of the reason we connected is because somebody wrote to us saying this guy's brilliant and he, if you can, will you meet him? The number of filmmakers we've met because you have said, you passed that on, is amazing. So I do think there is, what everyone's saying about community is true. It's like try and figure out, and there are a lot of young British Nigerian filmmakers working at the moment. There's a lot in shorts, there's a lot of people coming through. So I think it is about finding other people who will make you feel like you're not alone and also help you to keep raising the quality of your own work. Like keep asking how you make it better. And all of these guys are here because they asked every day, how can this film be better?
And everyone feels like an outsider. I'm telling you, like it doesn't matter. Like I did in London, you know, when I came from Matlock to Derbyshire to London, I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to make it as a northerner. You know, I don't know. There is this thing of like feeling like it's not reachable, but it is, and the BBC and the BFI are integral actually in making it reachable. So you're in a great place and a great city to make that happen.
Give it to the lady just behind. Thank you.
Hi, Ayo.
Hi, guys.
That's a production manager, guys, one of them. So.
Thank you. Rachel mentioned her proudest moment from this process. I'd love to hear from Wale, Akin, and Funmbi what your proudest moments are.
I said mine already, I think.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
What did you say?
What was it?
Just us utilizing talent on ground. And,
with the airwaves. I have loads. Okay, one. I would say that it would have to be. I think it was like, I don't know if I can say. Can I say that?
Don't say it. If you have to think about it, just.
Okay, so cool. Not gonna say it. So let's choose another one. No, so I would say the other one, because that one was like oof. But no, the other one I would say would have to just be. It was actually like also in the amusement park. I think, you know, when we got there, so we shot in this amusement park that had been in Lagos for like Wale is not young. I'm kidding. No, but like, you know, so growing up as a kid, like you would go there, right? And it had just become like derelict and like run down, and then some guy just took it over and was trying to renovate it. So we went there and we shot there. So it was nostalgic. Like very nostalgic, but also I think that the beach and that particular amusement park, like I feel like those were like the two like emotional points, because also Chopin delivered. Oh my God, I don't want to spoil the film for you guys, but like, okay, cool. But like he, you know, just how he really segmented his relationship with the boys just came alive in that particular place, and it was really beautiful to see. So that was definitely like one of my favorite moments.
I was really proud of you when you got the mainland bridge open.
Thank you so much.
For me, I don't think it's like one particular moment, but I'll say overall, I think seeing the journey of like the cast and crew, people who had, for them, it was like, at the beginning, it really felt like we're punching upwards. We're trying to make something that's never been made before in a way that's never been made before. Sticking to standards that we haven't been told to adhere to, and having people looking and making sure those standards are being met. To see everyone really grow through the process, and everyone, you know, give their all every day, and they gave more than their all, to be honest. And then being really proud of it. So really, the moment where we wrapped and everybody was super happy and like crying and taking pictures, and you know, they even got me crying at the end of it. You know, Rachel and Funmbi cry all the time, and it's like
Totally
cry
normal,
baby,
yeah.
You know? But like it was a really emotional day to just see this journey and everybody, and like they said, I think Akin said, the proof is in the work. There was a lot of love put in the work. There's a lot of passion put in the work, and I'm just proud for them first of all, and then proud for Nigeria beyond that. That we prove that our stories are valid and we can make things that stand anywhere in the world. Yeah.
And actually, that collaboration across, like, I've just seen that our DOP Jermaine came in, and our first AC Christina, and that collaboration again between international UK and Nigeria, that kind of trading of cross-pollination of skills. I think that was incredibly successful in the shoot, and that was really actually nice to witness. I think across the whole production from ground level right through to us, the bosses. No.
Okay, so I think we have to wrap there. And before we go, I'm going to put even more pressure on Akinola. He's going to be like, don't do this. Can you give us a final word or words?
Final words. Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess I just, I think I texted the crew this morning just saying that, like, all the sacrifices that they've made sort of like led up to this moment and beyond. So I'm just like really proud of them, and really proud of the guys who couldn't make it here, because actually, like you said, it takes a village to sort of make it. I think my producers have done a fantastic job. I think we've all done a fantastic job, and I just really hope that I'm really looking forward to everyone watching the film. I think it's a film about memory. It's a film about fatherhood and nationhood, and I think within that, I just hope that we also remember that there's real people involved in some of these stories, and just trying to honor them as best as possible. But yeah, enjoy.
Thank you.
That's what you said in the beginning. If people cry, I'll be happy.
Oh yeah. Don't be shy to cry.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.